Hello there, you're watching Out 24 News live from Algiers. Coming up next in our World News Programme. In a show of unity, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin have met in Beijing. Plus, President Joe Biden said an overnight raid by U.S. Special Forces in northwest Syria had resulted in the death of the leader of the so-called ISIL group, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi. Also coming up in our World News Programme, India has recorded more than 500,000 deaths from COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic, a figure that many experts consider highly underestimated. The presidents of the Economic Community of West African states convened in capital Accra to discuss the political situation in Burkina Faso and other nations that had recently experienced military coups. And a wave of resignations hit Boris Johnson's team of aides in the Downing Street. 3 of the departed aides were caught up in the number 10 lockdown party's role. Thank you for joining us. And in a show of unity, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin have met in Beijing as Moscow's deteriorating relations with the West take center stage ahead of the official opening of the Winter Olympics in the Chinese capital. During his visit on Friday, Putin hailed his country's close bond with China at a time with growing tensions with the West over Ukraine and other issues. Islam City reports.
On Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin landed in Beijing for the Winter Olympic Games and discussions with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The visit coincides with a surge in the Chinese support for Russia in its conflict with Ukraine. The two leaders' meeting will be their first face-to-face meeting since the COVID outbreak in 2019.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. We know well that this is an enormous work. We are confident that our Chinese colleagues have accomplished it flawlessly, as it always happens here during the preparation for such large events. I'm sure that both of Russian and Chinese athletes will perform decently. The entire world will be following closely the events of sports venues. As for our bilateral relations, they are developing in a progressive way with a spirit friendship and strategic partnership. They have indeed become unprecedented. It's an example of dignified relations who help to mutually develop and support mutual development.
The two presidents have positioned themselves as a counterweight to the United States and its allies, especially as Washington supports a more public stance on the possibility of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Following their discussion, the two presidents issued a joint statement highlighting their shared views on global security, particularly in regards to Ukraine and Taiwan. The two presidents then accused the US and NATO of having ideologized Cold War approaches to military strategy. Putin and Xi also used the opportunity to announce a major new natural gas and trade deal between their two countries. The Russian president's presence makes him the highest-profile guest at the Olympics, following the decision by the US, Britain and others not to send officials in protest over China's human rights abuses and its treatment of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. In an apparent swipe at Washington and other Western governments for ignoring the Olympics, Putin declared that the attempts by some countries to politicize sports to the benefit of their aspirations.
Still with the same story, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan headed to Kiev on Thursday in an effort to mediate the crisis with Russia, as EU leaders stepped up outreach to the Kremlin to defuse fears Moscow could invade. Usama Ayedi reports.
On a visit to Ukraine, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan offered to hold the Ukraine-Russia summit to the Kremlin to defuse fears Moscow could invade. The diplomatic offensive came as Russia accused the United States of ratcheting up tensions by sending 1,000 soldiers to Romania and 2,000 to Poland to bluster NATO's eastern flank.
The United States will soon move additional forces to Romania, Poland, and Germany.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday welcomed an offer from visiting Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan to mediate in Kiev's standoff with Moscow, and Erdogan promised to do whatever he could to end the crisis peacefully. Erdogan, who's pursuing his own diplomatic track, reaffirmed that a meeting with Zelensky is offered to host a peace summit with Putin. The Turkish leader is looking to leverage his special relationship with Putin and strong support for Kiev to set up peace talks. Zelensky thanked him for the efforts and insisted he was ready to do everything possible in all platforms and all formats to bring peace to Ukraine. Erdogan's push for a sit-down has so far been stymied by Kremlin anger about NATO member Turkey supplying combat drones to Kiev, and the two sides on Thursday signed a new deal aimed at expanding drone production in Ukraine.
And as the tension at Ukraine-Russia border is escalating, Ukrainian schools are preparing children for the possibility of war with Russia. At one Kiev school, police demonstrated bombs and shells while children practiced an evacuation. Nabil Khazini reports.
In the streets of the Ukrainian cities, scenes of tanks moving around has become something usual for local residents. But since tension at the Ukraine-Russia border has escalated, fear entered schools, which are now giving war lessons to kids, among them covering children's ears so that they have less stress by hearing less.
Most shootings happen at night, so you don't know who is shooting and where it comes from.
It's horrible. I'm already afraid that there will be an attack and that we'll all die.
Corridors at schools are aligned with reminders and stark warnings. Inside classrooms, deadly bombs, guns, and different kinds of weaponry are put on the desk. Children learn about them. But not only that, they also learn about unexpected shapes of weapons.
It looks just an ordinary toy, but it contains an explosive, and any contact, picking it up, catching it, or just walking by can set this off.
Teachers find it necessary that those kids are trained for war, given previous events that represent bad memories for those who witnessed them.
We never thought we would need this kind of knowledge, but then suddenly in June 2014, the kids were shot on their way to school. We found out later it was not the army, but separatist fighters, and this became our daily reality.
It's important to do this. People who are not here today will not know what to do.
In these Ukrainian schools, kids are trained for a possible scenario that no one hopes to become a reality.
And now the longest reigning British monarch, Queen Elizabeth, celebrates 70 years on the throne. However, Queen Elizabeth is not celebrating on Sunday as it coincides with her father's death anniversary. Let's follow her portrait with Miriam Zian.
Elizabeth's education was supervised by her mother, who entrusted her daughters to Marion Crawford, a governess. During World War II, she and her sister, Princess Margaret Rose, were forced to spend much of their time away from London and away from their parents. Queen Elizabeth II is the United Kingdom's longest reigning royal and among the world's longest ruling monarchs in history. On the death of her father, King George VI, Elizabeth II became queen on February 6, 1952, at the age of 25. Elizabeth was formally crowned as Queen of the United Kingdom and regnant of 7 Commonwealth countries. The year 1992 was marked by numerous scandals within the royal family. 3 of her children broke up with their spouses, including Diana and Charles. In August 31, 1997, Princess Diana of Wales died in a car crash in Paris, and Britain awakened in mourning following her death. 2.5 billion people attended Lady Diana's funeral. In April 29, 2011, Prince William, the Queen's first grandson, got married to Kate Middleton. The wedding of the century is followed by almost 2 billion viewers all over the world, offering a modern face to the royal family. The toxic press environment in Britain led Prince Harry, grandson of the Queen, and his wife Meghan to step back from the royal family at the very beginning of 2020. And in April 2021, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh and husband of Queen Elizabeth II, died peacefully at the age of 99 at Windsor Castle, 3 weeks after spending a month in the hospital for an infection and a heart disease. 2022 marks the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, a celebration of her 70 years on the throne. However, the Queen will not celebrate it on the 6th of February, as it coincides with her father's death anniversary.
President Joe Biden said on Thursday an overnight raid by U.S. Special Forces in northwest Syria had resulted in the death of the leader of the so-called ISIL group, Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi al-Hashimi, in one of the most significant counter-terrorism operations of his presidency to date. Usama Ayadi reports.
President Joe Biden announced Thursday morning that ISIL leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi was killed Wednesday during a U.S. counter-terrorism raid in northwest Syria.
Last night, U.S. Special Operations Forces, under the control of U.S. Central Command, conducted a counter-terrorism mission in northwest Syria that resulted in the death of ISIS leader Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi, also known as Haji Abdullah.
Biden administration officials stated that al-Qurayshi blew himself up as U.S. forces approached his compound, and the explosion resulted in multiple civilian casualties, though there was no discrepancy between the Biden administration and a Syrian civil defense group over how many. There were no U.S. casualties according to the Pentagon. Biden spoke from the White House Thursday morning to announce that the operation had taken a major terrorist leader off the battlefield.
Last night, operating on my orders, the United States military forces successfully removed a major terrorist threat to the world. Knowing that this terrorist had chosen to surround himself with families, including children, we made a choice to pursue a special forces raid at a much greater risk to our own people rather than targeting him.
Al-Qurayshi was named ISIL leader in October 2019 after his predecessor Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed in a U.S. raid in the same region earlier that month. U.S. officials said he was directly overseeing ISIL activities across Iraq and Syria, and the group was seeking to reconstitute under his leadership. Biden said al-Qurayshi was responsible for a recent attack on a prison in Syria holding ISIL fighters and was a driving force behind the genocide of thousands of Yazidis in Iraq in 2014.
Myanmar's military government has filed an 11th corruption accusation against deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi, the latest in a series of charges against the Nobel laureate, who faces a prison sentence of more than 150 years. Islam Seed reports.
Aung San Suu Kyi, Myanmar's deposed and present leader, has been charged with yet another case of corruption. The junta administration of the country has filed 11 accusations against the Nobel laureate. According to Myanmar state media, the military said Suu Kyi had received $550,000 as a donation for a charitable foundation named after her mother. However, the statement did not specify when the judicial proceedings in response to the charges would begin. As reported by sources, Aung San Suu Kyi is being tried on 11 charges. She could face a sentence of up to 150 years in jail if convicted. She has already received a 6-year sentence. Meanwhile, pro-Suu Kyi and human rights organizations claim the cases were brought against her for allowing the military to seize control and prevent her from returning to politics. Myanmar's junta administration, on the other hand, has refuted the charges. The military toppled the democratic government and seized power in a coup on February 1, 2021. The issue, however, was not accepted by the majority of the country's citizens.
As a farmer, I saved money for 15 years to build a house, and all that was left of my house was ashes. Not only my house, but the whole village was turned into ash. Now we have nothing to eat or live with.
People continue to protest the junta with street demonstrations, boycotts of official operations, and armed revolt. Since Myanmar's military takeover, at least 1,300 people have been killed in violence.
To some news about the African country, the presidents of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, convened in Ghana's capital, Accra, to discuss the political situation in Burkina Faso after President Roch Marc Kabore was removed on January the 24th, as well as other nations that had recently experienced military coups. Sofiane Kenturi reports.
West African leaders requested on Thursday that Burkina Faso's military forces provide a timeline for returning the country to constitutional order. According to ECOWAS Commission President Jean-Claude Cassibrou, the meeting voted to keep Burkina Faso suspended from ECOWAS governing institutions and repeated its demands for Kabore's immediate and unconditional release.
The head of state looked and took several decisions. The first decision that they took was to still decide to maintain the suspension of Burkina Faso from all ECOWAS institutions, to reaffirm the condemnation of this coup d'etat, and they also requested the immediate release of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, release without condition.
The summit emphasized the importance of putting an end to military coups in the region, since they generate more issues than they solve, and go against ECOWAS' tenet of good governance and democracy, he added. Meanwhile, in Guinea-Bissau, where soldiers attempted to topple President Omaro Sissoko Embalo on Tuesday, the summit decided to send stabilization force to Bissau, the country's capital, to assist in the country's stabilization, according to Bro.
The African Union expressed strong support to the efforts of ECOWAS in addressing peace and security challenges facing the region, including the resurgence of military coups.
Following the leaders' virtual summit on January 28, a high-level ECOWAS Committee of Chiefs of Defense Staff team was sent to Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, on Saturday to undertake discussions with military leaders.
According to data released by authorities on Friday, India has recorded more than 500,000 deaths from COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic, a figure that many experts consider highly underestimated. Mariam Zian.
On Friday, India's official death toll from COVID-19 surpassed 500,000, despite many specialists pointing to widespread underreporting of cases, with total infections at 41.9 million, second only to the USA. India reported 149,394 fresh cases, 13% lower than yesterday. 246,674 recoveries and 1,079 deaths in the last 24 hours. Total active cases have reached 1,435,569 and the death toll stands at 555. The highly contagious Omicron strain has boosted case counts, but rates have decreased in recent days. And the Health Ministry warned last week that there were signs of a plateau in virus cases in numerous regions of the country. Several states have implemented movement restrictions and are only now beginning to loosen them. At least 200,000 people died as a result of the wave, as hospitals ran out of oxygen and patients rushed to find treatments. After the Supreme Court of India ordered state authorities to compensate bereaved families, numerous states, including Kerala, Bihar, and Gujarat Prime Minister Narendra Modi's home state, have revised their death tolls with a late accounting of thousands of COVID-19 deaths.
In the United Kingdom, a wave of resignations hit Boris Johnson's team of aides in the Downing Street. 3 of the departed aides were caught up in the number 10 lockdown party's row. The resignations are looked by some to be like the start of a somewhat disorganized reset in Johnson's administration. The British Prime Minister is pledged to change his leadership style after a report by senior civil servant Sue Gray into the gatherings held at his Downing Street office, and residents condemned serious failures of leadership. Indonesia's holiday island of Bali will start welcoming back travelers from all countries from later this week, more than 3 months after announcing it was open to selected nationalities. Though Bali officially opened to visitors from China, New Zealand and Japan, among other countries, in mid-October, there has since been no direct flights, according to Tourism Minister. And now it's time to have a look to COVID-19 around the world in this report by Sofian Kintori.
Authorities said various investigations into illegal activities are underway in the nation's capital, following a rally that began with a group of truckers objecting to new Canadian COVID-19 vaccine mandate and new into larger rallies over the weekend. Airlines and other travel industry groups requested the Biden administration on Wednesday to eliminate COVID testing requirement for vaccinated passengers before US-bound flights, in an effort to jumpstart the sluggish international travel rebound. The Standing Committee on Vaccination, Germany's expert vaccine commission, is preparing a recommendation on whether to provide a 4th dosage of COVID-19 vaccine, according to a committee head Thomas Mertens, in comments released Thursday. The UK has reported another 534 coronavirus-related deaths, according to the government's daily update, with a new statistic revealing the virus is tearing through children of primary school age. According to the UK Health Security Agency, the number of deaths is high because the data includes a backlog of recent fatalities.
To the US now, running through a grim tally of recent gun deaths, President Joe Biden pledged to New Yorkers and the nation on Thursday that the federal government would step up its fight against gun violence by working more closely with police and communities to stop the surge in bloodshed. Islam Sid.
Following a rash of high-profile violent incidents, President Joe Biden paid a visit to New York City on Thursday, trying to turn the politically charged issue of crime into a focus on combating gun violence. The trip occurred after a string of high-profile shootings in major cities, including New York, and less than 2 weeks after 2 NYPD officers were shot on the job. Certain major cities saw more homicides in 2020 and 2021 than any previous year on record.
Every day in this country, 316 people are shot, 106 are killed, and 6 NYPD officers have been victims of gun violence so far just this year. The same in the town north of me, Philadelphia, and my much smaller town of Wilmington, Delaware, Washington, D.C. 64 children injured by gun violence so far this year, 26 killed. It's enough.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a veteran NYPD police captain, has promised to minimize the city's violent crime problem.
We need, as I stated, a 9/11 type response to address the domestic terror that is pervasive in this city and country. And President Biden is here to deliver on his promise to come here. He committed to it and he is here. And get New Yorkers the backup we need. Far too long we called for backup and it was not here. It is time to have that backup.
Hundreds of mourners and New York police officers dressed in pressed blue suits and white gloves packed in iconic Manhattan Cathedral on February 2nd.
Dear Wilbert, I never got the chance to tell you how truly special I thought you were. I remember how you always lit up the room with your smile, always happy and mellow, easy vibes, not an ounce of meanness in your whole body.
We knew this day would come, but that hasn't made it any easier. Only 21 days since the beginning of the new year, so full of hope and promise, yet we have already seen 5 of our own wounded and killed in the line of duty.
According to the latest numbers released by the NYPD, there was a 38.5% increase in overall significant crimes in New York City last month compared to the same time previous year.
And finally, for more news around the world, let's follow these summaries by Sofiane Kintori.
Attacks on journalists are on a rise in Mexico amid rising violence, human rights breaches, and impunity, with 4 journalists killed just last month. Robert Toledo, filmmaker for Monitor Michoacan, was shot by 3 armed men on January 31 as he prepared to shoot an interview west of Mexico City. The U.S. State Department has cleared the latest round of proposed weapons sales to the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates being initially approved for transactions, assuming the U.S. Congress does not veto them. A tanker with storage capacity of 2 million barrels of oil burst off the coast of Delta State in southern Nigeria, generating fears of environmental calamity and concerns for the crew's safety. The Freedom Convoy 2022 in Canada has hired legal counsel to demand that the GoFundMe lift their restriction after the crowdsourcing platform took down their fundraising page. The Justice Center for Personal Rights, a Calgary-based non-profit law firm that has previously represented clients fighting government COVID-19 restrictions and vaccine mandates, announced on Thursday that it's representing the Freedom Convoy 2022 in Ottawa and has a team of lawyers on the ground providing legal assistance and advice.
That's it for this edition. Thanks for being with me. The news continues on Al 24 News. Bye-bye for now.